The boutique smelled of roses, silk, and expensive perfume, a cathedral of elegance tucked into the heart of Manhattan. Beneath the chandeliers, wedding gowns shimmered like ghosts of perfection, each more elaborate than the last. It was the morning of Isabel Crane's final fitting, the heiress whose wedding was already being hailed by magazines as the event of the year. Her bridesmaids fluttered around her, gossiping and giggling, while the tailor, Marcus Wells, knelt quietly on the floor, pinning the hem of her gown. He was a tall, composed man in his early 40s, dressed simply in black slacks and a crisp white shirt. His hands were steady, his touch careful, the kind of precision that came from years of patience and pride in one's craft. But Isabel wasn't impressed. "Can you please be careful?" she snapped, jerking her leg away. "This dress costs more than your entire workshop, I'm sure." Marcus didn't flinch. "Of course, ma'am. My apologies. Just trying to make sure it falls right on your heel." Her friend Caroline snickered. "You'd think someone from wherever he's from would be nervous touching silk." Laughter followed, the kind that stung because it was designed to. Marcus glanced up for a moment, then back down, his voice calm. "Fabric doesn't care who handles it, ma'am. Only that it's treated with respect." Isabel rolled her eyes. "How poetic. Are you trying to be a philosopher and a tailor now?" "No, ma'am," he said simply. "Just someone who believes in doing things right." The room grew awkwardly quiet for a second. Caroline muttered something under her breath, and Isabel crossed her arms. "You know," she said coldly, "I only came here because my father insisted this shop was special. I didn't realize he meant the staff were charity cases." Marcus stood, folding the measuring tape with quiet dignity. "If you'd like to work with someone else, I can arrange that immediately." "Good," Isabel said sharply. "Find someone who actually understands refinement." He gave a small nod, his tone still professional. "Of course. I wish you and your fiancé a wonderful ceremony." Then, without another word, he left the room. After he was gone, the boutique manager rushed in, pale and flustered. "Miss Crane, that was Mr. Wells." "Obviously," she said, annoyed. "He's your tailor. He works for me." The manager swallowed hard. "He doesn't work for anyone. He owns this atelier. He's one of the most sought-after designers in the country. Half the gowns on that rack are his originals." Isabel blinked. "You mean, yes, ma'am. He designed your dress? The entire collection, in fact." The air seemed to vanish from the room. Her bridesmaids looked at each other uneasily, suddenly quiet. Isabel's face flushed hot with embarrassment, but she lifted her chin stubbornly. "Well," she said stiffly, "he should have said that sooner." But deep down, something twisted in her chest, something that felt uncomfortably like shame. Outside the fitting room, Marcus stood by the window, gazing at the city below. He wasn't angry. He'd long learned that pride spoke louder than character. But as he watched the taxis stream by and thought about the young woman who would soon walk down the aisle in one of his creations, he couldn't help but wonder if she'd ever understand what real beauty was. It wasn't in fabric or diamonds. It was in grace, and she didn't have any yet. Still, he decided he wouldn't cancel the commission. He'd finish the dress. But not for her, for the craft, for the art, for the quiet dignity his grandmother had taught him when she first put a needle in his hand and said, "Son, every stitch is a story." He smiled faintly and turned back to his studio, because this story wasn't finished yet. The days leading up to Isabel Crane's wedding were a blur of appointments, rehearsals, and luxury. Florists came and went, planners whispered into phones, and camera crews hovered outside the gates of her family's estate. Every moment was curated, every detail rehearsed, except the one thing that haunted her: the tailor. Every time she glanced at the dress bag hanging in her suite, she remembered the quiet way Marcus Wells had folded his measuring tape and walked away. No anger, no sarcasm, just calm dignity that made her own words echo louder in her mind. Find someone who actually understands refinement. She had said that to a man who was refinement itself. Her father, Richard Crane, noticed her silence one afternoon as they reviewed the guest list in his study. "You seem distracted, darling. Cold feet?" Isabel shook her head. "No, just tired. It's been a long week." He smiled kindly. "You know, I met Marcus Wells once. Brilliant man. Built his business from nothing after moving here from Georgia. Trained in Paris. Most people don't know that half the brides in this city wear his designs." Her heart skipped. You've met him? Yes, Richard said. He helped your mother with her anniversary gown years ago. She adored him, said he had the gentlest hands and the soul of an artist. Why do you ask? Isabel looked away. No reason. But there was a reason. The guilt had settled deep in her chest. It wasn't just that she had insulted him. It was that she had done it in front of others, like it meant nothing. She had turned grace into cruelty, and now that she knew who he really was, the memory burned like fire. 2 days before the wedding, Isabel returned to the boutique for the final pickup. Marcus wasn't there. A young assistant handed her the dress with a polite smile. Mr. Wells finished this himself, she said. He said it's ready for the moment. The moment? Isabel asked, confused. Yes, ma'am, the assistant said. He said you'd understand when the time came. She took the bag, her heart twisting with curiosity and something close to regret. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear. The estate was a vision. White tents, silver chandeliers, roses cascading from every archway. Guests in designer suits and glittering gowns mingled across the lawns while photographers captured every perfect angle. But perfection was not what Isabel felt. As her makeup artist finished the last touch, she looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Flawless, yes, but hollow. Her maid of honor, Caroline, grinned. You're going to be the most beautiful bride this city has ever seen. Isabel forced a smile. I hope so. When the clock struck noon, she stepped into the gown Marcus had designed and gasped. It was unlike anything she had seen before. The silk shimmered subtly, almost breathing with her movements. The bodice fit her perfectly, every stitch delicate yet strong, every curve crafted with understanding. It wasn't ostentatious. It was elegant. It felt alive, like the kind of dress that carried meaning. As she stood before the mirror, she saw something stitched along the inside hem in tiny golden thread. Words. She lifted the fabric and read them quietly. Grace is not inherited. It's chosen. Her hands trembled. He had known. He had known what she needed to learn. And he had said it not in anger, but through art. Through the very gown she had mocked him for touching. For the first time in her life, Isabel felt unworthy of the dress she wore. As the ceremony began, she walked down the aisle beneath the garden arches, every eye on her. But in the back row, near the catering staff, stood Marcus Wells, quietly watching. He hadn't been invited. Her father had insisted he attend to ensure everything fit perfectly. But Marcus had chosen to stay out of sight. When her gaze swept over the crowd, their eyes met for the briefest second. No words, no gestures, just understanding. He gave a slight nod, as if to say, You did fine. She felt a lump rise in her throat. For the first time, the applause of the crowd meant nothing. At the reception, while the orchestra played and champagne glasses clinked, Isabel found her father speaking with Marcus near the terrace. Her father looked delighted, laughing at something the tailor had said. She approached slowly, unsure what to say. Marcus turned as she came near, his expression calm, not smug, not cold, simply kind. Mr. Wells, she said softly, your work, it's breathtaking. He smiled gently. Thank you, Miss Crane. I'm glad it made you feel beautiful. That was the goal. Her throat tightened. It made me feel more than that. It made me feel small, in a good way. He tilted his head slightly. Then perhaps the dress did its job twice. She nodded, eyes wet. I was awful to you, I'm sorry. He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, People show who they are when they think no one's watching. But they also show who they can be when they try to make it right. She swallowed hard. Will you stay for the reception? He shook his head. No. The dress belongs to you now. My part's done. And with that, he tipped his head politely and walked away into the night. Isabel stood there, her father beside her, the music and laughter blurring around them. She didn't chase him. She knew she didn't need to, because she'd already found what she'd lost somewhere along the way. Humility. The wedding video went online 3 days later, a carefully edited masterpiece meant to show the perfection of the Crane family's grand event. The sprawling gardens, the silver chandeliers, the glowing bride walking down the aisle in her shimmering gown. It all looked like something out of a dream. But what no one expected was how the internet would see what the camera accidentally captured. In the background of one scene, as Isabel made her entrance, there was a man standing at the very edge of the crowd. Not among the guests, not with the staff, just quietly watching, hands folded, a calm dignity in his expression. Someone in the comments noticed first, "Who's that man by the hedge? The way he's looking at her. That's pride, not judgment." And then another, "That's Marcus Wells, the designer. I'd recognize him anywhere. He's the one who made the dress." The comments began to pile up. People shared screenshots, tagged fashion blogs, and within hours, Marcus Wells was trending across social media. A popular influencer reposted the video with the caption, "The bride who mocked the designer and then wore his masterpiece." It spread like wildfire. Fashion magazines picked up the story. "The humility dress," one headline read. "The silent statement of grace," said another. But the most striking image wasn't the gown. It was the photo someone had taken of Marcus, leaving the reception, coat draped over his arm, walking alone beneath the twinkling lights. It went viral. Meanwhile, Isabel sat in her apartment, phone buzzing relentlessly. She'd turned off notifications hours ago, but her assistant had texted her anyway. "You need to see this." She opened one of the articles, her heart pounding. There it was, her wedding, her name, her face, and the story she wished she could rewrite. Every publication praised Marcus, not for his talent alone, but for his grace under humiliation. They quoted the line stitched inside her gown, "Grace is not inherited, it's chosen." Isabel stared at the words for a long time. The internet was calling it his quiet revenge, but she knew it wasn't revenge at all. It was mercy. She called her father. "Dad, have you seen the news?" "I have," he said. His voice was calm, almost proud. "I also called Marcus. He's not upset. He said the story isn't his to tell. It's yours." That made her throat tighten. "He's still protecting me. After everything I said." "Maybe that's what makes him great," her father said softly. "You can't humiliate someone who has no hate in his heart." The next morning, a letter arrived at the Crane estate. Not an email, not a text. A letter, written in neat, looping handwriting. It was from Marcus. "Miss Crane, the attention has gotten a little out of hand, but I'm glad people connected with the message. The dress wasn't made to shame you. It was made to show you what you could be. Every person has moments they wish they could take back. What matters is what they do after. You've already taken the first step by reaching out that night. Keep going. P.S. If anyone asks, tell them the gown's secret isn't in the design. It's in the change it inspired." Marcus Wells. Isabel read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it inside her jewelry box. Not for display, but for memory. By the end of the week, the story had become a national sensation. Fashion houses sent Marcus offers. Talk shows begged for interviews. But when one host finally managed to get him on camera, he refused to indulge the gossip. "I don't design to make statements," he said. "I design to remind people of their worth, even when they forget it themselves." "And what about the bride?" the host asked. "Do you forgive her?" Marcus smiled faintly. "I forgave her before she apologized. The truth is, people can surprise you, in both directions. But grace means believing they can change." That clip played across every network. Isabel watched it late one night from her living room, tears welling in her eyes. He hadn't humiliated her. He hadn't even defended himself. He had simply shown her what true class looked like. Quiet, patient, unbreakable. Months later, at a charity gala hosted by the Crane Foundation, Marcus arrived as an honored guest. The theme was Art and Redemption. Isabel spotted him across the ballroom and hesitated before walking over. She looked different now, not because of the gown she wore, but because of the humility in her eyes. "Mr. Wells," she said softly, "thank you for coming." He nodded, smiling. "I almost didn't. But your invitation said the event was for teaching young designers about integrity." "Hard to say no to that," she smiled faintly. "You inspired it. I thought maybe your lesson shouldn't stop with me." Marcus chuckled quietly. Then it sounds like my grandmother was right. The world always needs more tailors of hearts than tailors of clothes. They shared a quiet laugh, and for a brief moment, the flash of cameras didn't matter, the headlines didn't matter. Only the understanding between two people who had both learned something priceless. And as the orchestra began to play, Isabel turned to him and said, "Would you mind one more fitting, Mr. Wells? For a better version of myself." He grinned. "That's the easiest commission I've ever taken." The following spring, the city was blooming again. Cherry blossoms lining the avenues, sunlight spilling across the windows of shops and studios. Inside one of those studios, laughter echoed against the soft hum of sewing machines. A new sign hung above the door: the Wells Foundation for Design and Integrity, in collaboration with the Crane Family Trust. It was Marcus's idea, but Isabel's funding that made it possible. What had started as a private apology had turned into a public mission, a space where young designers from all walks of life could learn not just the art of creation, but the discipline of dignity. Marcus stood near a long table, helping a student adjust the tension on a sewing machine. His hands were steady, his voice calm. "It's not about perfection," he said. "It's about purpose. Every thread you touch tells a story. Make sure it's one worth reading." Across the room, Isabel watched quietly. She was no longer the polished, aloof heiress who once scoffed at him. She came to the studio every week, no cameras, no headlines, just to help. Sometimes she organized materials, sometimes she swept the floors, sometimes she simply listened. It was during one of those afternoons that a young girl, about 19, approached Marcus shyly. "Mr. Wells, I just wanted to say thank you. I couldn't afford design school, but because of this place, I'm learning from you, from the best." Marcus smiled warmly. "I'm not the best, Maya. I'm just someone who never stopped learning." He glanced toward Isabel. "But if you want an example of growth, talk to Ms. Crane there. She'll tell you what it takes to start over." The girl turned to Isabel, eyes wide. "Is it true? You were his client?" Isabel laughed softly. "Oh, I was much worse than that," she said. "I was his lesson." The girl grinned. "Then you learned well." Isabel smiled, glancing at Marcus. "Yes, I had a good teacher." Later that evening, when the students had gone home and the lights dimmed, Marcus and Isabel sat together by the window overlooking the city. A soft rain had started to fall, tapping gently against the glass. "It's strange," Isabel said quietly. "A year ago, I thought success meant being admired. Now, I think it means being useful." Marcus nodded. "That's the truth most people never reach. You can't build a legacy on attention, only on intention." She tilted her head, smiling. "You've got a quote for everything." He chuckled. "My grandmother used to say, 'A needle doesn't speak, but it still leaves a mark.' I guess I just learned to find words for the same thing." They fell silent for a moment, watching the rain streak across the window. The city below glowed with the promise of 100 news stories. "Do you ever regret it?" Isabel asked suddenly. "Finishing that dress for me after what I said?" Marcus looked thoughtful. "No. Regrets wasted on the past. That gown wasn't made for who you were. It was made for who you could become. And you did." Her throat tightened, but she smiled. "I'll never deserve your grace." He turned to her gently. "Grace isn't earned, Isabel. It's given. That's why it changes people." The rain softened outside, and a hush settled between them. In that stillness, there was peace. Not the fragile kind that comes from silence, but the strong kind that comes from forgiveness fulfilled. Weeks later, the foundation hosted its first public exhibition. Dozens of young designers showcased their work: clothing made from recycled fabrics, reimagined cultural designs, creations that told stories of struggle and hope. The city's elite attended, but for once, the spotlight wasn't on wealth or luxury. It was on talent. When the press asked Isabel what inspired her to fund the project, she smiled and said, "A man who saw value in people before they saw it in themselves. He taught me that true beauty isn't stitched in fabric. It's stitched in compassion." The crowd applauded, cameras flashed, but when Marcus stepped on stage beside her, the applause changed. It deepened, because everyone knew this wasn't about redemption for her or recognition for him. It was about what they'd built together, a bridge between pride and grace, stitched with respect. After the event, Marcus leaned toward her and said softly, "You've come a long way from that fitting room." She smiled. "You too." He laughed quietly. "I was always here. You just finally saw me." And as they walked out into the night, the city lights reflecting in puddles around their feet, Isabel thought of those golden words once stitched into her gown. Grace is not inherited, it's chosen. This time, she didn't just wear them. She lived them.